Okay. Morning, those who are listening to this Shiur, Mr. Shem, before Shabbos. Oh, Andrew, you're the only one. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You're the only one so far. I was about to say, whoever wants to listen later. Okay. Right. Well, we've got quite a bit to do, so we'll start straight away. We're doing the Mishnah. Are you okay, Andrew? Are you okay?
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Up to the Mishnah, Kuf Mem Vav Amud Aleph, and continuing to discuss the halachas of preparation of food. Says the Mishnah, Sheva Odom Esachovis, person is allowed to break a barrel and lechol imenu groigros, in order to eat from it the dried figs. Actually, his kavanas is keli, with as long as you have no intention to make a keli. This is the Mishnah, which is very negel ma'isa, because what happens is this person wants to open a packet of cereal, a packet of crisps. Person wants to open a tin of tuna, and the question is one allowed to? So the Mishnah over here says that one is allowed to, as long as it has no intention to make a keli. The question is, why is one allowed to? Even though it is true that one is breaking something, and all kilkul is only asam midrabanan, not minatera. The fact is, let me look at this. If a person is doing it for tikkun, that means a person wants to do a tikkun, that's asam minatera. But kilkul is asam midrabanan. So why is it permitted? So here there's two malachim in Rishonim, and it makes a big dafkemina to our cases. Most of the Rishonim say the reason it's permitted is because one needs to get to the food, and the only way to get to the food is to be able to break it. And according to that, one would be allowed to break anything in order to be able to get to food. Tesis over here, a long tesis, the first tesis of the page, says the reason is because over here in our Mishnah we're talking about specific kinds of keli. We're talking about mustaki. Mustaki is a keli which is very, very weak. It's made out of a lot of broken pieces stuck together. And that is why it's permitted, because it's not a real keli. But a real keli won't be forbidden. Obviously, that has a lot of nafkeminas regarding opening a proper tin, if one is permitted. Mishnah carries on. Here we have, and it's very hard because nowadays we don't have this kind of idea, as far as I'm aware. And it makes a lot of nafkeminas, but basically it's like this. You have a big barrel, and the barrel has a lid. There are many ways to open the barrel. One is to take the lid off. Another is to make a hole in the lid, or to make a hole in the barrel. And in making a hole of the lid, you've got a choice. You make a hole at the top of the lid, like it's like a cork, it's like a top. You can make a hole at the top of it, or in the side of the lid. So there's actually four ways to get wine out of a barrel. One, take the lid off, which that would be absolutely fine. But people often do not want to do that. So then you can make a hole in the barrel, a hole in the lid, and when you make a hole in the lid, you've got a choice to make it in the top of the lid or the sides of the lid. So the Mishnah says, Yehuda says not allowed to make a hole in the lid, because that's a keli. But Chachamim matir, and the Chachamim say it's okay. Why? Because that's not a normal way of making a hole. The normal way to do it is to take the lid off. We mustn't make a hole in the side. And the Gemara describes in detail what does it mean not to make a hole in the side. If somebody had a hole, you're not allowed to put wax to block up the hole, because the way you'd block it up with wax is you'd have to smoothen it out. And that's the Issa Memarech. It's in face. Somebody smoothed out the wax, and he said it could be over this chatos. That means it's issa deiraisa, so that's taking the kud over here. That smoothing out wax to block up a hole in a barrel could be an issa deiraisa. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah says that a person is allowed to break a barrel to get a hold of dried figs. How do you break a barrel? You take a knife and you chop off the top of the barrel. Now, there are two kinds of figs. There are figs which are just loose in the barrel, and there are figs that have been pressed together into a thick, heavy cake, which we've had before. That the only way to eat such a fig cake, is to take a big, heavy knife and to cut through it. A little bit like, I imagine, a bit like Yerushalmi kugel, where it's a heavy, duty thing, and you need to really cut through it. So the Gemara says over here, Now, Beishia says, we're not talking about loose figs. We're talking about figs that have been pressed together. But if the figs are scattered about in the barrel, then you're not allowed to take a knife to open it. The more explain why I should make enough kiminas regarding taking a knife to chop off the top of the barrel. Makes it that why should be a difference if the figs are pressed together or not. You scatter not. Maybe you can take a bottle of wine, and you chop off the top of it with a knife. You're allowed to open it on Shabbos without any problems. So why did the Beishia say it has to be pressed figs? Answers more. That means we had a machlik regarding Issa Muktzah. Are you allowed to take a kilish mlachta to Issa letzorich gufa? We pass you're allowed to. So if you need to open a bowl, and the only way to open it was with a knife, we pass it's permitted. Then the Chemio's got a shitta which is more elaborate, but the nice halacha is you're not allowed to take anything on Shabbos except for its main use: a spoon for eating, a plate for eating from. You can't use it for, you can't even use something which is not muktzah on Shabbos for a use which is not the normal use. So therefore, here you're taking a knife to open a bowl, which is not the normal way. You don't normally take a knife to chop off the top of the bowl. So therefore, says a Beishia, how can you do it in our Mishnah? The answer is, we're talking about a person that's got figs in the bowl, which have been squashed together into a heavy cake. The only way to cut through the figs is he has to anyway take a heavy knife. So once he's taking the heavy knife anyway, you can go and cut off the bowl. According to the Chachamim, that you're allowed to take anything for any reason, as long as it's a reason for Shabbos. So then you're allowed to even take, even when you don't have pressed figs, even if you have loose figs. Meaning, the reason why you have to have pressed figs is not because of the problem opening the bowl. It's to do with the problem as to why you're taking the knife. According to Abba, you're not allowed to take a knife unless you have a need for it. So therefore, we have to talk about case we got pressed figs. Says the Gemara, why did Abba say our Mishnah talk about pressed figs? And explain that our Mishnah is going to quote from Nehemiah that you're taking a knife in order to cut the figs. And that's why you're allowed to open the bowl. Talk about loose figs. And then it fits in according to the Chachamim. It means why talk about pressed figs and then explain the knife is because of the figs? Why not just say we're going to quote to the Chachamim that you're allowed to take a knife anyway? The Mishnah bothered him. Why is Mishnah talk about dried figs? Listen to the The Eke Chiddush of our Mishnah is that you're allowed to open a bowl with a knife. Why talk about dried fruit? Just say, you've got a bowl, you want to open it, you're allowed to chop off the top on Shabbos. Why talk about dried fruit? The answer must be the Mishnah is trying to hint at something else. That we're talking about someone that's got dried fruit, and the only way he can open it is cut them through is with a knife. And that is why we're going to Kodesh as a Beishia, that you're only allowed to take a knife for a specific need. So therefore, we're talking about you've got dried figs, and you're taking the knife in order to cut through the figs, and now that you've got the knife to cut through the figs, you're allowed to cut through the barrel. Very similar. So, they used to have baskets of dried figs, so now you want to open the baskets. There are three ways. The basket was like tied up in cords, in ropes. There are three ways to open it up. One is to cut through it. Another way is to open the knot. Another one is to make the rope free and loosen it. So the Raisa says like this: Mate umafkia v'choitech. You can untie it, you can unravel it, v'choitech, and you can cut through it. V'tanya idach mate, you can undo it. Avloi mafkia v'loi choitech. We're not allowed to unravel or cut through it. So one case the Raisa is allowed to use a knife and cut through the rope. Another time it says you're not allowed to. The Tanya of Nehemiah, even a spoon, even a cloak, even a knife, you're only allowed to take it on Shabbos for the main purpose. And therefore you can't take a knife to cut through a basket of figs because that's not its main purpose of a knife. Are you allowed to take a spear and stab a barrel on Shabbos in order to make a hole? That means we're discussing somebody's got a barrel and he wants to make an opening in order to get the food out. And he's doing it in an unusual manner because what he's doing is instead of opening the barrel, normally he's taking a spear and he's spearing through the hole. So the Gemara says like this: is that mutter or not? He's trying to make an opening loss. So that's a tikkun mana. Really, he's not trying to make an opening. If you want to make an opening, take the lid off. What he's doing is he wants to show his guests, help yourself to wine. I'm going to show you I've got an abundance of wine. So he makes a hole in the barrel by just sticking a spear inside it to show everybody help yourself. And it's mutter. That this is considered trying to make an opening and it's forbidden. And you can cut off its head. You're allowed to chop off the top of a barrel. What's the difference between spearing a barrel and cutting off the top of the barrel? Well, says no. There, he definitely is trying to show generosity by cutting off the whole top. Why? Because he's opening a huge opening in the barrel by cutting off the top half of the barrel. Here, by putting a hole with a spear, if he's trying to show generosity that everybody can help themselves, just open it. That means the reason why he's spearing it is not because he wants to be able to show generosity, because that's a small hole by making a spear. The answer is he wants to have that this barrel should have more openings. More openings. That's also on Shabbos. You're not allowed to make another opening in the barrel. When he cuts off the top of the barrel, he could take off the lid. Instead, he cuts off the top. By cutting off the top, he's just showing that he wants to show generosity. He's not trying to make an extra opening, and therefore it is mutter. The Mishnah says you're not allowed to make a hole in the barrel. But the Chachamim say that's Shittas of Yehuda. The Chachamim say it's mutter, but on the side, everybody agrees it's forbidden. And the Gemara now brings two mahalchim. What exactly the Mishnah say? What's like this? Omar, when the machlekes lemal and machlekes is in the top of the barrel. Avum that side, by the side of the lid, the side of the lid, everybody agrees is also. That's what it means. You should make a hole on the side. Why? Because that is definitely for the sake of increasing the value of the barrel. You're trying to fix the barrel. Why? These barrels have a very big lid. If you make a hole in the lid, what would happen is you won't be able to use the barrel so well in the future. Because it means that if soil can fall inside, dirt can fall inside, so you want to keep the barrels, what do? You make a hole on the side of the lid. And that way, you've got the lid as good. Machlek is only on the side of the lid. On the top of the lid, every degree is mutter. Why is every degree it's mutter? Because you're obviously not doing it to make a good lid. You're just doing it because you want to have an extra generosity of opening the barrel. That's referring to the actual barrel itself. That's forbidden. Let's summarize. Machlek is not Mishnah if you're allowed to make a hole in the lid of a barrel. And the Mishnah finishes off at the side is definitely forbidden. We have regarding this a machlekas, what's going on. One man Doma says that like this. The top of the barrel, that is a machlekas, meaning the top of the lid of the barrel, that's a machlekas, because it's a question whether you're trying to improve the lid or not. The side of the lid of the barrel, everybody agrees is forbidden. Why? Because then you're trying to definitely improve the lid. Because what you do is by making a hole in the side of the lid, it makes it better for people to be able to drink from the wine because they know that no rubbish can get in. The second one says no. The top of the lid, everybody agrees is permitted because who in the world would ever want to make such a hole? The only machlekas is when you do the side of the lid. The side of the lid, that's the machlekas. Oh, when does it say that everybody agrees it's forbidden? It's when you make a new hole, not in the lid, but in the side of the actual barrel. That's forbidden according to everybody. Says the Gemara, it's not allowed to make a new hole on Shabbos. If you want to make the hole bigger, Moisif you're allowed to. The Yeshomim ain't Moisif, and you're not even allowed to make the hole bigger. The Shovi and they both agree. That means if the barrel had a hole from which the wine should come out, and with time wine congealed there and blocked up the hole, you're allowed to pierce the hole that the wine should continue to flow out. So again, you're allowed to pierce a hole which always was there because it just congealed and blocked up. Regarding making a new one, everybody agrees that's forbidden. Regarding increasing the size of a hole which is already there, That is a machlikas. Why not that make a new hole? Because that way you're making a tikkun mona, you're opening a hole. When you add, meaning when you increase the size of the hole, that's also awesome. Omar Rabba. Here the Gemara says a very fundamental thing. And it's good to remember it if it's possible. Minat Torah, a hole is only considered a hole if it serves two purposes. Purpose number one is to bring things in. Purpose number two is to bring things out. That means, let's say a person's got a bowl, and the purpose of the bowl is that liquid should come in, and at the same time that liquid should come out. That is forbidden. If a person makes a hole with the intention that only liquid should come out, but he never intends that liquid should come in through that hole, that's not awesome in that Torah. The midrabanan they forbade, even if a hole is only made for one way. That means minat Torah for a hole to be considered into hole, a pesach, is only if it is both ways. But if it's a hole for one direction, it's only awesome midrabanan. So the Gemara says like this. A pesach which doesn't come in and out in a pesach, not a pesach. Why did the Chachamim say that making a hole which only works as a one way should be awesome? After all, the Torah says only a hole which works for both ways. It says, Rabba, there's a purpose to this gezerah. What's the purpose of the gezerah? The purpose of the gezerah is that there's such a thing as a chicken coop. A chicken coop, when you make a hole in a chicken coop, there are two purposes to it. One is that there's a lot of bad air, vapors inside the chicken coop. And if you don't make a hole, it will suffocate the chickens and they will die. The second thing is that you want more air to come in. That means you want air to come in, fresh air to come in, and you want the bad air to come out. But many people, when they see people making a hole in the chicken coop, are not aware that there's two purposes to it. They will assume there's only one purpose because they think that the whole purpose is to get air to come in. They're not aware that there's a need for the air to come out. So therefore, if we were to say that you're only forbidden from making a hole if it serves as a dual purpose for going in and going out, people will say to themselves, well, if that's the case, a chicken coop with my only intention is only to come in, should be mutter. And the rice of the halacha is, it's awesome in that Torah. So if a Chazal had to forbid a hole which only works in one direction, in case people start making holes in chicken coops thinking that there's nothing wrong.
So are we only talking about one hole? We're not talking about a barrel that's got two holes, one foot in and one foot out.
You're right, very good. We're talking about one hole, but the hole has to be used for both in and for out to be awesome in Hatur. If it's only being used for one direction, it's only awesome midrabban. Let's say a person makes a hole in the tin of tuna. He has no intention that afterwards to put things in through that hole. His whole intention is only to get things out of it. So therefore, it's only awesome midrabban. Why did Chazal forbid it? Because Chazal realized that if we tell people you're allowed to make a hole which is only going to be used in one direction, they'll make a hole in a chicken coop. And they'll think to themselves, they've done nothing wrong. Why have they done nothing wrong? Because the chicken coop is only for one direction. Without realizing that chicken coop, actually, the hole there is for two purposes. Again, so Omar Rabba, an entrance which is not made for in and out, not an entrance. It's to get air in and to get the bad smell out. People would never make a hole big in a chicken coop. Why? Because if they did, let's say if people would make a big hole in a chicken coop, what would happen is weasels would get in. If weasels would get in, they would kill off all the chickens. So for a person would be very, very careful never to make a big hole in the chicken coop. So therefore, Chazal never saw fit to make a gzeira of a hole which is only in one direction where you're making it a big hole. Again, a hole in one direction is only also midrabbanan. It's only also midrabbanan because people might do the same about chicken coop without realizing that's a two-hole direction. It's a two-way hole. But a big hole a person would never make in a chicken coop because weasels would get in. Sometimes a person made a very, very small hole in the chicken coop. which was too small for the air to get out. A person make it bigger. So therefore, then it is indeed forbidden. That means it is possible sometimes to make a hole bigger than a chicken coop, and therefore they forbade it even when it's a one-way hole. It's forbidden to make a hole bigger on Shabbos. That means if a person's got a keli and he wants to make the hole bigger, he's not allowed to do so on Shabbos. You're not allowed to make a hole, you are allowed to make an old hole again, meaning that if a person had a bowl with a hole, and with time the hole got blocked up, you're allowed to pierce it. There are two reasons why a person has a hole. So, there's two reasons why a person blocked up the hole of the bowl. One is that the air shouldn't escape. For wine to ferment properly, it shouldn't have too much air coming in and out. Another reason is the wine shouldn't leak. In a place where the hole was only made that air shouldn't escape, that means the blockage was only made that air shouldn't escape, that blockage is a very, very weak blockage. So to pierce it is permitted. A blockage which is made to stop from wine spilling, that's a much, much better one. So that, Leishonu, that you're allowed to make a pierce it and to guard it from air. To strengthen it also. What kind of block is considered to guard it from air and one is to make it strong? If you do it higher than the wine level, you're obviously not doing it for wine to escape. A barrel, let's say it's full 90%, the last 10% is air. So there, any hole which you block up is only to save the air. But if it's below the wine level, that is to strengthen it. He disagrees. Of course, it's to guard it. Where you did it below the sediments. Below the sediments, there's a huge pressure for the wine to escape because it's right at the bottom of the barrel of the wine. If you've got a big barrel, the higher you go, the less strength you need to make in the barrel. The bottom of the barrel has to be stronger. So when is it considered a very powerful blockage? It's only at the bottom of the barrel. The higher up in the barrel, it's not considered a powerful blockage, and one is allowed to pierce it. I'm going to bring you a raya to agree with you. A little bit of background. If a person owns a courtyard with a neighbor, then the halacha is, if they ever decide to split up this chutzah, they have to divide it half-half. But for every entranceway that each one owns, we give them 4 amas. Because in those days, 4 amas around the entranceway was an area where people would unload and load their things. So let's say I have 2 entrances to the garden, and you only have 1 entrance to the garden. We split the garden half-half, but before we do that, I get 4 amas for 2 entrances, that's 8 amas, and you only get 4 amas for 1 entrance. Now, what happens if the entrance has been blocked up? Do you still get 4 amas? So then it depends. If it looks like it's completely blocked up, then you're never going to reopen it, then you don't get 4 amas. If it's just closed off, and you may reopen it at any time, you do get 4 amas. Similarly, the halacha is, Chazal said that any kaver is metame 4 amas around. If a person goes next to a oven, a coffin, within 4 amas of approaching a coffin, one becomes tummy. The reason is Chazal did not want people to stand over the coffin and get really tummy. So therefore they said within 4 amas one is tummy. Imagine a person's dead body is in their house. If the house is completely sealed off, we see the house as a coffin, and therefore as an oven, and therefore coming within 4 amas makes a person tummy. If the house has entrances, it's not considered as it's considered a room, and therefore it's not tummy within 4 amas. How does one decide if it's considered sealed or not? So this is what the Brisa talks about. By Sosim, a house blocked up, Yesh amas, you still get 4 amas to the entrance, because at the end of the day, you could still open up the gate. Once you get rid of the frame, that means the door frame is gone. If I took away the door frame from my entrance, and now we want to split up the garden, I don't get 4 amas for that entrance. Because you can say to me, look, you've taken away the door frame, you obviously never intend to use this door frame again. By Sos, a blocked house, it's not metame 4 amas around. If you get rid of the frame, metame kol svivov, then everywhere becomes tummy. So here we see the same idea. that in order for something to be considered a blocked entrance, it has to go through a process of really blocking off, like getting rid of the door frame. So too, like Rava, that when is a seal in a barrel considered a good seal, only when it's at the bottom of the barrel, which is the place where you need a lot of strength to be considered blocked off completely. Now, the old days, what you'd have a barrel, you make a hole in the barrel, and then you take a reed, like a pipe, and you stick it into the hole, and that is a tap. Now we're discussing this tap, gufsa, a reed. Rav Osav Shmuel Shoy, Rav says it's Osav, Shmuel says it's Mutter. And the war explains. Cutting the reed down to side, everybody agrees it's Osav. Why is it Osav? Because you're cutting a reed to sides, that's a tikkun monah. If the reed, which was already cut to sides, and was put inside the barrel, fell out, and now you want to put it back to Kulam Pligi the Shoy, of course it's Mutter. Because you're doing nothing. The tap was there, the reed was there, it was cut to size, all you need to do is put it back. Everybody agrees it's Mutter. Keep Pligi went to the argue with the Chaticha B'le Mesakna. You cut the reed on Friday, but you never put it in. So what's the Shaila? Man the Osa goes in the Mosim Lechatich Lechatchilo. Man the Shoy goes in, meaning like this. You got the barrel on Friday, you made a hole, and you got a reed, and you cut the reed to size. But you never put the reed inside the hole. So now, one mandama says there's nothing wrong. You're not going to do any sum on Shabbos. You can do it on Shabbos. Other mandama says, wait a second. You never actually used it this Shabbos yet. And you've never used this reed. It's the first time you're ever going to use this tap. If it's the first time you're ever going to use this tap, there's a very big possibility that you'll be disappointed with the way that it was cut. And then you'll come to cut it down. So therefore Chazal said it's forbidden. Again, if you've once used it, we know that you're satisfied with the size and you won't come to cut it down again. But if you've never used it, you might come to cut it now for the first time because you want to make sure, even though you cut it already on Friday, but this is the first time using it on Shabbos, you may come to cut it again.
Would it be an issue taking one reed from one barrel and putting it into another barrel?
That is a very, very, very good question. It's something which the Shabbos discusses, Mufal discusses. Many places say there is. There is, yes. The reason is, you would think that this is something which is not even saying negah, but it is negah. And I'll tell you where. Is let's say you have shoelaces which were fitted and you put them into one shoe. And and now you want to, in Shabbos, move them from one shoe to the other. So the question is, do we say like this? You saw these shoelaces work, right? Because the first shoe they worked. Now you guys put them into another pair of shoes. So you're not chayshish, because what's the problem? Or do we say no? They work to this shoe, but maybe they come to this shoe and find that the shoelaces are too big, right? And now you want to cut them down to size, because sometimes one shoelace for one shoe can be very, very good size, but the next shoe, it's much, much too long, right? If you've got too many different amounts of holes. So this is something to discuss. It's a big machlekes in the postka. I won't ask on this. You've been a very strong point, but halacha and ma'aser is quite complicated. It depends whether how well, if you've used it and you know that it's going to be okay. That's the shiloh over here. So Moses says, Ketanoi. Ein chod chidsh refers beyond, you're not allowed to cut down the reed on Yom Tov, Vein Sechlem b'Shabbos. Noflo machzir noisa b'Shabbos. You can take it back. Vein Sechlem b'Yom Tov. But Yoshe, Meiko Yoshe permits it. Now this is very strange. He permits something which the Tana before already permitted. Now Yoshe, what's Rabbi Yoshe trying to say? That you're allowed to actually cut it. And he's arguing on the first case, or come a second one, you're fixing something. So obviously not talking about that. Ela Sefer, Tanakama Mishishoy. The Tanakama also said it's mutter. So what does it mean when he says it's mutter? Elo, the Chaticha B'le Mesakno. He cut it, but he never put it in. Ikebenayu. Man, Masava goes vinon, Masava le goes vinon. Doash of Sheish Vedav Itimish Vedav Yechnon, Aloch Kav Yoshia, the Aloch Zak Kav Yoshia. That you're allowed to put it back in where you cut it, but you never used it before. And this is important halacha. It comes out according to Rav Yoshia. If a person never used the reed before, he's allowed to on Shabbos use it for the first time. I will not chayshish that you say, hey, wait a second, you've never used this before. Now that you're going to use it as a tap on Shabbos, you might come to cut it. No, since you cut it before Shabbos, we'll make you've got a barrel and it's got a hole, and you want to pierce the hole. So you want to block up the hole. You're not allowed to use wax. Why? Because if you use wax, as the Mishnah says, it's mimareach. You have to smoothen out the wax to make a good hole, to make a good blockage. So more discusses now. Mishcha, what about oil? Oil can also block something up. Oil, if you leave it for a long time, it congeals. can you use oil to block up your bowel? Rav Osa v'shmol shoy. Man the Osa goes in the Shon Shabbat. If we allow you to use oil, you'll come to use wax. And if you use wax, you'll do memareach. Man the shoy goes on. Oil, you can't do memareach. You can't smooth an oil because it's a liquid. It's not like wax, which is a solid. So therefore, we're not good. So therefore, there's no problem in memareach. Oh, you might come to use wax. That we're not good. You're allowed to use oil. According to Rav, you're allowed to use oil. Omar Tvus Rashba. Tvus Rashba was the name of a person, and some say he was given this interesting name was because he was a hunter. Mishba means to hunt. Omar Shmon. Hai Taufa the Asa Osa. When you pour wine from a barrel, you want it to go in one direction. You don't want it to splatter everywhere. So he says you're not allowed to take a hadass leaf. If you look at a hadass leaf very carefully, if you fold it in the middle, it's got like a seam in the middle, you can use it as a funnel to direct the wine to go in the direction that you want it. So he says you're not allowed to do this on Shabbos. You're not allowed to take a hadass leaf and use it as a funnel to make your wine come out. My time, if we allow you to use that hadass leaf, you might go and make yourself a real gutter, which is mesaken mono. You might start plucking leaves off a tree. If you've already got leaves cut off, if you say the chashash is might pluck leaves, you don't need to be choishes, you've got the leaves already prepared. If the chashash is that once we allow you to use hadass leaves to make a furrow in order to get your wine out of the barrel, and then you might make yourself a real funnel, a real gutter, so then even if you've got leaves cut, it's forbidden. Base side is a piece of...
We had the case earlier about putting the garlic in the tap.
Yes.
To block it up. So if the intention for the garlic was to preserve the garlic, could you not say the same for the leaves? That's the reason why you're putting it there?
Right. There, people would want to protect the garlic, so they'll put it into a barrel to save it. But here, I don't see that people would use hadass leaves to save it. The hadass leaf is it's a leaf. People are not going to try and save the leaf. People are using it just to direct the wine. You're saying a good point in the sense that we see from there that blocking up the bowel itself is not a problem. The problem is only because they have garlic blocks up. The problem is only because of wine metalton and things like that. But over here, we said by wax, there's a problem with mareach. Oil that was machlikas exeot mareach, but garlic is permitted. But here by the leaf, you're not doing it to protect the leaf. You're doing it because you want the leaf to channel the wine. Once you use the leaf to channel the wine, you might come to use a proper gutter. So now the Gemara says another halacha, which is not so clear what's the connection, except for the fact that it's machlikas Rav and Shmuel, like it was before, not a machlikas Rav and Shmuel. Base side, there's a piece of felt. So a person's got like a carpet, and he wants to move it from one house to the other. So what does he do? What would you do if you want to move a carpet from one house to the other? There's no eruv. So you wear it. So he takes a carpet and he wears it around himself. Mutter also. So the Gemara says, base side, the Rav also Shmuel shop. What says, if it's soft, everybody agrees it's mutter. Because like a blanket. You're allowed to put a blanket around you. It's the normal way of wearing it. Because if it's very hard, like a thick rug, everybody agrees it's also because nobody wears a thick, unbendable, unpliable cloth. Something in between, that's the machlok. It looks like you're carrying it. It does not look like you're carrying it. It says, this halacha of Rav that is forbidden was not learned from a halacha, but from a story which we medayek it. And as the Gemara concludes, the diuk is incorrect. And since the diuk is incorrect, in fact, it comes out that everybody holds its mutter. Rav went to a place and there was nowhere to sit. Came into a house, nowhere to sit. Not because of the karmelis. So he went to sit in the karmelis. Carrying into a karmelis is awesome to do our bottom. Imagine you go to invite somebody to your house. There's no space in your house. He goes and sits in like the back lane. The back lane is usually a karmelis. And the problem is he had nowhere to sit. So isolate base sadya. So somebody had the chokhmah. They wanted Rav to have somewhere to sit. So they put a piece of like the carpet around themselves as a cloak and went outside and put it down on the floor so Rav should be able to sit comfortably. Lo Yosef, Rav never sat. Man the Chazar, the one who thought Savam should be sadya also. He thought the reason is because Rav disapproved. How could you wear carpet? It's carrying, and therefore he forbade it, and therefore he said to me, can't sit on it. The Rav allowed it. That means if a person wants to transport a blanket, let's say from one house to the other, and he wears it as a proper cloak, it's not a problem because it's like a cloak. It's not like a burden. He didn't sit as respect for other Talmidei Chachamim. Since they only brought one carpet, meaning the only person that could sit was Rav, Rav thought that wasn't nice. Had they brought a few of them, he would have sat happily. But they only brought one, that he didn't want to sit. It is interesting, the Rishonim point out, Kahana Ravasi were actually Talmidim of Rav. So therefore, logically, there was a good reason for Rav to sit without them sitting, because after all, he was much greater than them. But the answer is that Kahana Ravasi, they grew with learning from Rav until eventually Rav saw them on some level as a contemporaries. And he thought it was disrespectful they should be the only one to sit and not them. Okay, so the Maisa, it comes out that wearing a cloth, felt cloth, as a method of carrying it in order they should get it from A to B, so it depends. If it's very hard, every degree is forbidden. Very soft, every degree is permitted. In between, it's a machlokes. So the Gemara establishes that even though we said the Rav forbids it, Rav actually permits it, and Rav did not sit on it for a different reason. So a person would be allowed to, depending on the situation, if it's a normal way of wearing it, to carry something. It says the next Mishnah, you're allowed to put food inside a pit. That means, let's say it's a hot day, and you don't want things to get hot and moldy. So you find an empty pit, so you stick your food there. That's cooling it down. Cellars are always cooler than houses. So if you find a pit in the ground, you can put your food there to cool it down. Those days didn't have fridges. Let's say you've got tasty water, and you've got a dirty pond, but the pond is very, very cold. So you're allowed to stick a bottle of, let's say, wine into the pond. Not pour it into the pond, because then you'll never be able to drink it. The pond is dirty. You're allowed to put a bottle of something, let's say nice wine, into a pond of cold water, that way to cool it off. We will explain in more detail. Or if, let's say, you want to warm up, you've got a liquid and it's too cold, you're allowed to stick it in the sun in order they should get warm. Person who dropped his clothes in the way, he's allowed to continue walking with them, and he doesn't need to worry. That means he doesn't need to worry regarding the issa schita. That means, let's say, for example, by mistake, a person falls into a pond on Shabbos, and he's soaked. He's allowed to carry on walking, yes. Oh, what about seichet? We're not choishes. Furthermore, we're not choishes that people seeing him walking in the street will say, hey, why is he wearing dripping clothes? He must have washed them on Shabbos. He did kibbutz on Shabbos. So there are two heterim in this halacha. One is we're not choishes for schita, and another one is that we're not choishes that people will say that he's washing on Shabbos. Once he gets to the first courtyard where he can get undressed, he can spread them out in the sun that nobody should see. If anybody can see, what will they say? They'll say, I know why he's spreading out his cloth, because he washed them on Shabbos. And people will say this person does washing on Shabbos, and they'll think that it's permitted to do washing on Shabbos. So you're allowed to spread out the clothes in a way that nobody should think that you're washing your clothes on Shabbos. So the Gemara now examines every part of the Mishnah. The first part of the Mishnah is that you're allowed to put, let's say you want to cool down your ice cream, you're allowed to put it in a hole in the ground where it's cooler. Furthermore, pshita, of course, what's the reason why would the water should be awesome? Because if we allow people to start putting things into holes, they may come to close off the holes and we're not choishes. Obviously, you're allowed to. What's wrong with putting a bottle of wine in a cold pond? What's this? There's no issa hatmona. Hatmona is when you're trying to heat things up. Here, you're trying to cool it down. The more says sefer, it's the chilei. The chiddush is the sefer is hatzin and bechama. You're allowed to put something in the sunshine that it should warm up. Furthermore, hanami pshita, that should be mutter as well. That's when the real is kamash malon. This is a very big chiddush. The halacha is not allowed to heat things up on Shabbos. You're not allowed to put things into coals on Shabbos, like we had in the second period. There's a big issa of, the third period more, that you're not allowed to do atmana because we're scared that a person will come to stoke the coals and to light a fire, to heat things up. That's masha'inkin, to put it directly in the sunshine, that is permitted. So if you've got something very cold, baby food which is cold, and you want to warm it up, and it's a hot day, You can put it directly in the sunlight and it is mutter. And we're not chayshish that you'll come to do hatmona, true hatmona. Says the book, Misha Noshu v'chulu. Oh my God, if something's forbidden because of my sign that people think that what you're doing is bad, you're not even allowed to do it in the most private room. It's a very important halacha, not allowed to do something in a private room which would cause people to think they're doing an aveya. For example, this is brought down the Shulchan Aruch. Let's say you're drinking almond milk with your meat. So if you do it in public, it says you have to put almonds in the milk so everybody can see that it's almond milk and not cow milk. But what happens if you eat it by yourself? You're locked up. Nobody around for miles. Afal PK, you have to make sure that people should not think that you're being over. Because whenever you're also because of Ma'as Ayin, even the most private place.
So based on that, why would you be able to do the last part of the Mishnah?
Oh, very good. The Gemara asks your question. Tanan, the Mishnah says before, it's not like that. The Mishnah says, make sure that nobody can see. And it's more Tanoi. The Tanya Blood of Shimon permitted. So it's a machlokes Tanoim as to whether one is allowed to do something in private, which in public would be a Ma'as Ayin. The Mishnah, interestingly enough, writes that when it's a Issa D'Rabbanan, that means when people watching you, you're not on an Issa at all. The people watching you would think to themselves, you've been over an Issa D'Rabbanan. Then if there's nobody around, you've got two reasons to be mad. First of all, nobody's around. And second of all, even if they was to see you, they would only think you're being a Issa D'Rabbanan, then you don't have to be Chosh from Ma'as Ayin. So the example that I gave, he brings a machlokes. The Mishnah says you can't be makeup. The example that I gave of almond milk, the Mishnah brings this example. He says that case would not be true. Because what's the issa of drinking milk with meat? It's only midrabanan. There's no issa of drinking meat with milk with nater. Nater is only cooking meat with milk. So if I'm eating in public, so I have to make sure that people can see that my milk is not real milk, it's almond milk, and I have to add almonds. But if I'm eating in private, since even if somebody was to see me, who don't even think I'm doing over this midrabanan drinking milk and meat, so if I'm actually in private and nobody can see me, then you don't have to. But it's nice, it's a machlokes in the poskim. I'm just bringing it up to a nafkin and a ma'aseh, but it is a machlokes. Do you have to be chosh from Ma'as Ayin? Says a little bit about cleaning on Shabbos. Omar Avhuna. Amenayet talise b'Shabbos. Topic of Mem Zayin Mudale. If a person shakes his talis on Shabbos, chayav chatos is chayav chatos. That means if a person's got dirt on his talis and he shakes it vigorously and off comes all the dirt, it's chayav chatos. So let's see the top of the second top rash on the page. Chayav chatos is only buna because that is washing it. Kivega straight away points out that I'm Le'el, if you've got to get in Ashas, I'm Le'el Dafka from Aleph from Dalef Rashi to ask him if they would so Chiur. Kivega asks a kasha. Rashi, if you remember earlier, didn't talk about so much then, but Rashi earlier says there's no such thing as cleaning unless you use water. There's no such thing as cleaning unless you use water. If you clean something without water, it's not awesome now. It's only awesome with Rabbanah. Here, what are you doing? You're just shaking the talis. How can you be chayav chatos? So the Mishnah Berurah asks the kasha, and the Mishnah Berurah answers that there's two kinds of dirt. There's a stain. A stain you can shake from now till tomorrow, it'll always stay. So therefore, even if you scrape it, you're only over midrabanan, because whatever's there, there's always going to be remnants there. Therefore, it is also midrabanan. But there is such a thing where things are on top of the garment, like pieces of earth, or feathers, little feathers, which can be very disturbing. And then, by just giving it a vigorous shake, it comes off, and then it is awesome in Torah. It comes out very chiddush. And this din that you have to wash with water to be over in Torah is only by a stain or something which is embedded in the clothes. But something which can be done by just shaking it off, it's like awesome in Torah. And now the more limits this halacha. Only by new clothes. Old clothes, people don't care so much, so shaking it doesn't make it washed. We only said this by black. White and red, people don't care so much about white and red clothes, they should be clean. It has to be that you care. That means only if it bothers you. Let's say, for example, you have a feather on your clothes and you shake it off. And the Shur talks about having dew, like drops of water on your clothes. So if you care about it and you shake it off, that could be an issa. If you don't care about it, nobody's bothered, so you're not makbid. He saw to be the chomim shaking their clothes. Shaking the clothes. Shake the clothes in his face. Why? And non-lekabdinon midi, we don't care. Since we don't care, we're allowed to shake our clothes. And his mussar that was shaking clothes on Shabbos is not correct. We're allowed to. Abai was in front of Rabbi Yosef. Only Habi Kunsoi. Pass me my hat. Rabbi Yosef asked Abai to pass him his hat. There was a bit of Jew on it. It's a bit, some say it's fed or Jew. He didn't know what to do. Why? He didn't know what to do. If you would give it to, if you would shake it, it might be over the device of cleaning it. If he wouldn't shake it and he was allowed to shake it, then it's a lack of cover to Talmud Chacham to pass him a dirty hat. So he wasn't sure could he clean it or could be a device. Not clean it, it could be a disrespect. Because if you can clean it and you don't clean it, it's awesome. Amalina, foit, shoddy, shake it and throw it off, and the we don't care. Since it doesn't bother us, therefore you're allowed to clean it. So therefore, again, obviously it bothers him a little bit, otherwise he would have told him to shake it off. When it's disturbing, when a person says this is like dirty and is makpid, then you're not allowed to shake it off. If a person doesn't care, then it's not a problem. If a person takes a talis, instead of wearing it, he folds it up and wears it over his shoulder, it's chayav chatos. People who sell clothes, which are folded on the shoulders, not just people who sell clothes. Anybody. That's the normal way of shopkeepers, that they would always wear their clothes like that. That means if a person's got money wrapped around in his cloak, most people put money in their pocket. The shopkeepers, they have a certain style, they have like a certain ability to put the money into their cloak. So really anybody, if it's his normal way to carry, is chayav. But a shopkeeper, that's his normal way. So again, if a person carries a hat on his shoulder, so that's not a normal way. So he's not a chayav, he's only asking to do abana. But if he does it, if that's a normal way, some people walk around with their talis over their shoulder before Shabbos, etc. So this is a normal way. So that's carrying, so one is chayav chatos. Varatonim. Rashi's Varatonim is the name of a place. Others say that it's people who are runners. That means it's people that like to run very fast. Yoitzim besudon shak seifon, they're allowed to wear a scarf around the shoulders. Because they run very fast, or because they live in this place, they won't bother letting the scarf go all the way down. Because if you want to run very fast, you can't have things dangling. So therefore, they're allowed to wear it like that, because that's normal. It was normal for these people to go like that, therefore it's not. That the son of Leznok, he wore like a scarf around his shoulders. He made sure to wrap a little bit around his finger. Why? Because he was choishesh that maybe it's not a proper way of wearing it. So at least by wrapping it around his finger, that way it would make it clear that it won't fall off and there won't be a problem of carrying it. He didn't need to wrap it around his finger because it's a normal way of wearing it. Even if there's no string around his finger, one is allowed to wear it around his shoulders. He's not allowed to make a gutter on Shabbos. Here we're referring to folding up your clothes like a hem. Some people have a hem on their clothes, a hem on the trousers, a hem on the cloak. And the question is, are you allowed to? Are you allowed to make a hem on your clothes on Shabbos? They call it a gutter because a hem and a gutter look similar in a certain way. Pockets or bother. And bother, this is how they used to make pockets. It was like to fold it up and it would have a pocket around the clothes. And that is awesome. Why is it awesome? Why is it awesome to make a hem? The reason is because it's tikkun monah. Because for those who like to have a hem, for them, the completion of the clothes is to have a hem. Since the completion of the clothes is to have a hem, so therefore it is considered, because it's therefore it's considered tikkun monah. Their hem is the end of making the clothes, so that's tikkun monah. That means he showed them different kinds of folds. I mean, some people, when they make their clothes, they have ruffles in their clothes, right? They want to make the clothes look very fancy. So they make different ruffles, which is the same idea, and it's the same problem. It's stick on mono, because you're making your clothes nice. So he said, am I allowed to make this kind of ruffle? What about a different kind of ruffle? Take this rule. If you intend to fold it and keep it like that, so it is awesome. Why? Because that is your intention, and therefore that's considered that you're making the clothes better. If you're just doing it temporarily to look nice, I mean, sometimes a person's walking in the street and he's got a talis going all the way down. So he folds the talis up and sticks it into his belt or into his garter. He's not doing it to actually keep the clothes like that. He's only doing it because he wants to make himself look nicer for a short time. So the shori, that's permitted. He would make himself look nice in his cloak, and he did not care, even on Shabbos. Because when you're just doing it to make yourself look a bit nicer, you're not doing a fixing of the clothes. It's just your way. A person wants to wear his hat forward, back, bent this way, bent that way. He's just doing it to make himself look nice. But when he's doing it to improve on the clothes, that's tikkun monem. You also have that means, in those days, the way they would wear talis was, it would spread around them. We nowadays actually wear our talis folded up on our shoulders. That's our way of wearing it. But in the older days, that wasn't the normal way. The normal way was to spread like a shawl. I don't know if you've seen people wearing a shawl. Women sometimes wear a shawl. It's spread across the shoulders, across the entire bodies. And one time, Rebbe went and he folded it up on his shoulders. Yehuda ben Zerus, who was the son of the father of Amir, meaning the brother of Amir, did Amir not say Chayav Chatos? Because since you're wearing it not like a normal way, you're carrying it, you're not wearing it. Amir so machmir, he spread it out. That means Rebbe held that's okay. He heard the name of Amir that it's no good, it's Chayav Chatos. That means it's like taking a jacket and wearing it, instead of wearing it properly, wearing it slung over the shoulder. Some people would say too, that's called wearing it. Some people say that's carrying it. Similarly, Yehuda Nossi wore it folded up over his shoulders. He thought it was okay. He heard the name of Amir, that's no good. He was mevatel data as a respect. He listened to Amir. Now the Gemara says exactly the same thing, just different nuances. Who said what? He also it wasn't Yehuda ben Zilus, and Yehuda ben Kufusoy. It was Yehuda ben Kufusoy, Chason of Akiva, the son of Akiva. Oh man, he said Bezule Chiva B'Kev Chatos. So he changes who said it, and he changes who he said it in the name of. It wasn't the name of Amir, it's the name of Akiva. Did Akiva not say Chav Chatos? I'm going to think Akiva as can. Was Akiva dactic till so much? Shul Shel Rebbe Talisa, he spread it out. He also was about Yehuda Omar Nishal Itma. The Rebbe in fact never wore it. Somebody came to Rebbe and asked him, "Am I allowed to wear my talis folded up?" And Rebbe said to him, he was thinking to maybe permit it. Came along one of these Amorim and said to him, "No, Rabbi Akiva or Amir said it's forbidden," and therefore he said it's forbidden. So either Rebbe went like that, or Rebbe was asked about it, and either it was the name of Rabbi Akiva or it was the name of Amir. But the halacha is that one has to wear his clothes in the normal way. So, for example, if a person takes his jacket and slings it over his shoulder, it is forbidden. What about wearing a jacket without putting your arms in? That is much better, because you're not just slinging it over one shoulder, you're wearing it over properly your whole body, you're just not putting your hands in. That is a machlokes in the poskim, and it's not easy to be machriya, because even Shemazalman talks about it. There are many who are makeup, but others who are machmir, and I understand some do it on a very, very, very hot day, they struggle. But generally speaking, it's correct to wear one's clothes in the most normal way possible, because otherwise it's considered carrying. Okay, this is where we said we'll get to on till Shabbos. On Mitzvah on Shabbos, we'll finish the Perek. Okay, thank you, Andrew, for joining in.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No.
Okay, ask good questions today. I like the questions. I appreciate them.
Thank you.
Have a very, very good Shabbos. That's stuff with everything.
And you. See you.
Okay, go to